So Bob, emails, let's read them. What do you say?
Yes.
This first one actually is not an email. Well, it is an email from my malpractice insurance.
Oh.
I enjoy a good story of a therapist being sued for some reason.
Oh.
I think it's because of my mild OCPD and how I am a little obsessive about following the rules and about principles.
Yeah.
And it is a pleasure for me to read other people's failures. I don't have schadenfreude for their failure, but it gives me pleasure to know that there's a system in place that will punish people for breaking the rules.
Yeah.
And the rules are there for a reason, right?
They are.
Especially in our field, right?
I'm always glad it ain't me.
I guess there's a little bit of that. But anyway, so from my malpractice insurance, an LPC, licensed professional counselor woman, began providing counseling services through a mental health therapy app, like BetterHelp or Talkspace or something.
Yeah.
Why'd you give that face?
I'm not sure how I feel about those.
What do you mean?
Well, I think therapy is so much about relationship. It's hard to imagine that, if I were trading emails with somebody, that I'd be doing them much good, or that I'd be developing the kind of relationship with them and the transferential response that I'm hoping to, facilitate.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they're probably good for some things and maybe not good for others.
Yeah, it's interesting. So just a little tangent on that. I had the same thoughts that you did 10 years ago when this first started to come up more.
Right.
And I thought for myself, there's just no way that I could do my style of therapy over email and texting, or even, I don't even like doing video. I do phone. I find phone to be way more intimate than video for some reason. I don't know. Anyway, so I agree with you personally, and I don't know. I've never been in a position where I had to consider doing that style of therapy to enhance my practice or anything.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe if I had tried it, I would have liked it. But yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's part of our generation or our style of therapy.
Yeah, maybe. Right. Yeah.
But research shows that not only what you're saying, for some things, online therapy can be just as effective and just as enjoyed by the clients as in-person therapy.
Right on.
CBT, DBT kinds of things can be done over that sort of method. But even relational therapy has been shown.
Really?
Yeah, our style of therapy, some people will do. I think it takes some skill. You and I come from a generation where we just didn't come up while texting and emailing wasn't even invented yet.
Right.
And so for us, it's always harder to communicate and understand people over that venue. But younger people, and even people our own age who do this a lot, they can actually communicate and receive a lot of communication through those kinds of methods.
That's the nicest way anybody's ever called me an old curmudgeon.
Yeah. Well, I'm the same as you. And so it has, some clients will say that it's wonderful, and there are benefits, obviously, because you don't have to leave your house. Yeah. It can be done, these online services, BetterHelp, Talkspace, they will often have contact with their clients every day, like maybe Monday through Friday. Right. It's not just once a week. It's maybe twice a day. I knew someone, a supervisee of mine, who actually trained people at Talkspace to do this sort of stuff, and she would wake up in the morning, and for a few hours she would email all of her clients, and then she would take a break for a few hours, and then in the evening she would email them again, and she felt like she was a part of people's lives.
Wow.
And from our standpoint as a therapist, it would require a whole other set of skills, because we would have to really retain the human being in our hearts, right? Because it's hard, it's easier for me to retain someone in my heart if I'm talking in person with them, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of things to consider, but research has shown that it is absolutely effective, and the initial curmudgeon-y reaction to it has not been found to be true.
Right on.
Does every client benefit from it? No, but not every client would benefit from in-person therapy.
Yeah, right.
You know, so it's a wonderful alternative that, you know, people can try. Plus, it can be cheaper.
Yeah, well, right. I think that's one of its appeals is it's more affordable and people can access it then, and therefore.
Yeah, and often it does involve a video or phone component.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's not just texting. Yeah. Anyway, so LPC, she began providing counseling services through a mental health therapy app with a female client in her early 40s over a period of approximately a year and a half for depression and anxiety about resuming dating as a single mother following a contentious divorce. So the client was recently divorced and was anxious about dating again.
Mm-hmm.
So the client started to see unprofessional behavior. And the interesting thing about this case, in these malpractice cases, is everything is documented.
Oh.
Because all conversations are texting or recorded or something.
Right.
So literally everything that happens between therapist and client has been documented and you can review later.
Wow.
So, which is another benefit to online therapy in this way. If you're a client, you can actually go back to previous things that your therapists have said as a reminder or sort of booster in between contact. Cool. Yeah. But anyway, so the client started seeing unprofessional behavior. For example, the therapist frequently used unprofessional language, transcended professional boundaries with the client, made tangential comments about her own political views. I wonder what that means. But we actually have some quotes from the therapist that the therapist said.
Oh, this is going to be ugly.
To the client. If you don't, so again, the client's talking about dating and having some struggles with it. The therapist said, if you don't change, you'll end up being a withered, lonely old lady.
Oof. That's a hell of an image. Like, you'll be alone. You're likely to be alone, or you'll be a withered old lady. Oh, my goodness. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I will say that I have, when maybe frustrated, probably frustrated, but also wanting to really make a point to a client. I haven't said that, but I've said things to the effect of, look, if you don't change and if you're not willing to change, everything's going to stay the same or get worse. So it's up to you.
Yeah.
You can either begin to consider changing, X, Y, or Z, or you can resign to the fact that this is never going to change. That's my professional opinion. I've gotten there, but
that's a little different from withered old lady.
Right.
Yeah. It's a lot different.
A lot different. But, you could see how some sort of Albert Ellis-y sort of therapist would, or a Fritz Perls, you could see someone with a good enough relationship could really go for it in that way. So I'm not going to say that statement in and of itself is 100% always.
No. This is no context here. So,
Right. There also could have been a bit of sarcasm or something. Who knows? But when we look at all the other, as I always say, stupid is as stupid does. Yeah. Because when stupid therapists, we see one stupid thing, it's usually like just the tip of the iceberg, as you will see. She also said, quote, "Any guy looking for a wife is probably not going to be crazy about your out of control kids."
Wow.
Now, that one, I have I can't relate to that one at all. It's because now I guess the therapist is trying to motivate the client to change her parenting style such that her life will improve and her dating life will improve or something. But
I guess.
But why would you say that? There's so many other ways to say that.
There's lots of ways to say something that aren't attacking and judgmental or whatever.
Right. So now it just kind of looks like the other thing is, like, it's one thing for a therapist to say something off the cuff in session. It's another thing for a therapist to type something out and then before clicking send go like, yep, I approve that statement. It says something.
I read my emails and I almost always change my opening every email I write.
Yeah. Like, what do you mean?
Like, I'll write something and it'll be like, because, maybe my mood or something, I'm a little annoyed or something. And then I'll write. And then when I'm done, I'll look at it and I'm like, Bob, you didn't even say hi.
Yeah.
Like, can you soften that up a little? Thank you for contacting me. Just something simple like that.
Right.
Anyways.
Yeah. And I think that also, I don't know about you, but I feel like our generation just isn't as good about that kind of stuff. Like I find younger people, and maybe people our own age as well, but just people other than me have a better time at conveying politeness, I guess, and courtesy than I do. I find communicating over texting to be kind of an annoyance, and so I treat it that way, and I'm very brief.
Oh yeah, I know. I got a text from you today. Do you want me to read it to you?
Yeah.
Here, I'll read it to you. This is a good one. This is a typical Kirk text. It says, hold on a second. I got to dig it up here. It says, K.
Yeah, I know. My cousin used to give me crap about that shit. Because, she would be like, because you said, I'm going to be 15 minutes late.
Right.
And I was like, K. And my cousin would give me crap about it because to her it sounded dismissive.
Oh, I just figured it's you just... Well, see, I read it, I think, the way you mean it, which is just like, all right, got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because to my cousin, I think she was wanting me to say something like, I have received your message. Thank you so much for letting me know. I don't know. It's just like...
Some...
Like, I want to acknowledge it, and I don't want to spend a lot of time.
Right.
And I just want to... Yeah, I heard, I got you. It's fine. Anyway. Another quote from the therapist.
Yeah.
Trying to help you is like Groundhog Day. It's like I'm starting from square one with you every day. So again, not inherently an abusive, terrible thing to say, but when you take it in context with everything else.
There's so much the problem with these is there's judgment, dripping with judgment attached to them.
Right.
These messages could be communicated in a way that were therapeutic or useful.
Right.
And, maybe take some of the damn thorns out.
Right. Yeah. And if we take it for what it probably is we have a therapist that has no fucking clue what they're doing.
Yeah.
Is judgmental of all their clients, has no idea what therapy even is.
Yeah.
And is just yelling at all our clients all the time.
Yeah.
She also says, and this is the kicker. I think we are soulmates. We should hang out next time your ex has your kids. So
that's weird.
So in the context of all this judgment, she says, I think we are soulmates. We should hang out soon.
Huh.
Which is obviously not ethical.
No.
And again, it'd be one thing if you just said it off the cuff. It would be awful. But it's another thing to type it out and and sign off on it before clicking send.
Yeah.
Right? So, and there were many other statements
it goes
as well.
on, huh? Oh boy.
So after the client brought the LPC's behavior to the attention of the mental health therapy app, so the client went to BetterHelp or Talkspace or whatever and said, I'm a little concerned about this therapist. The app administrators conducted an internal investigation. Upon review of the messages the LPC, the counselor, exchanged with the client, the app administrators prohibited the counselor from using the app and reported the counselor to the State Board of Licensing Professional Counselors.
Do we know if they were citing other clients?
We don't, but I assume that the therapist was seeing other clients.
Probably, yeah.
And the board looked into it, the state board, and the investigators asked the counselor whether she provided a professional disclosure statement and a client bill of rights to the clients. What do you think it was found on that investigation? She didn't, right.
I'm surprised the app let her not do that.
Well, the app doesn't oversee. It just connects.
That's it?
Yeah, that's all that's why when people will complain, because people will complain about BetterHelp or Talkspace as an organization.
Oh.
And what that is, and not all the time, because sometimes the organization is at fault for things, and they're always learning because it's like a new field, really. It's a new industry of online therapy conglomerates, but
right.
And I trust that they'll iron out the problems. And the thing that I will say to that is it's not good when BetterHelp or Talkspace makes a mistake, but coming from mental health, the amount of mistakes that organizations make would astound people. Like I've worked for mental health organizations that regularly made ethical and harmful mistakes to their clients all the time as a policy. You know, like one example was I was a young therapist, and I had a gay teen client who was coming to me secretly, and he didn't want his parents to know, obviously, because he wasn't out of the closet, and he was wanting to talk with me about being in the closet and his own experiences. And this is, in the late 90s when it was even more hostile for gay people.
Right.
And my executive director at my agency, who was also a therapist and should know better, brought it up in a staff meeting that she was going to send out a mailer to all the clients. She was just going to pull all the addresses from all the files and send this mailer, this like monthly mailer of like talking about different services that we offer and this kind of stuff.
Unbelievable.
And I said, I heard that and I was like, oh, well, I just have to alert her that she can't do that because of blah, 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 right? And so I raised my hand, staff meeting, I was like, oh, well, you can't do that. I have a gay client. Or, if you send something to their house, his house, then he could literally be killed by his parent. I don't know what could happen. Something horrible could happen. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And I just thought she'd be like, oh, you're right. Of course. And she said, long story short, she's like, nope, still going to do it. Yeah.
I don't send letters to anybody that even have my letterhead on it. I just put my last name.
Yeah.
Like
there's a way to mitigate this. You just don't
send mailers.
Well, or you ask people, is it okay? And they check a box.
They check a box.
Yeah. And then you put them in a database and you don't send them any.
How does somebody sleep at night?
Yeah. So, and
I know how they do it.
Denial.
They yeah.
And money grubbing, because it's all about like profit and all that. Right. And so BetterHelp Talkspace will make similar mistakes at times, but they're learning.
But what you're saying is these folks are just literally they're brokers. They take no responsibility.
Right. So being angry at when you have a bad therapist like this, and getting angry at BetterHelp or Talkspace is like getting angry at Google or Yelp for recommending this person to you. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like it's just because Google, the SEO, puts someone high on the list doesn't implicate Google, because we all understand Google doesn't investigate their search engine entries, right? Or whatever you call it.
So it's sort of like, like Psychology Today publishes, like therapists can put an ad on Psychology Today. Right. Same idea, I guess.
Yeah. Right. It would be like getting angry at Psychology Today for having a therapist on their directory.
Well, do you know what the business model is though? Like, do they get money per session?
Yeah.
Oh, so they don't have a completely
right. So
it gets a little bit muddy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like Uber in that if an Uber driver were to do something horrible, most of us understand, because it's been communicated to us, that Uber doesn't do a full background check, or might do a little bit of a background check, but isn't there's not a supervisor sitting in the car watching their every move, kind of a thing. Like an Uber driver might do bad things. Right.
So, but they have a driver's license, so they're allowed to get in the car and drive.
They have a driver's license, so that's state. And if you complain to Uber about a driver, they might actually rescind that driver's ability to work for their company in the same way that BetterHelp in the same way that this did.
Okay.
This
I get it.
Once they get alerted, then they, they'll take actions, but they're not going to monitor like the way a supervisor does, because they would make no money in doing that, because they would be so labor intensive. Yeah. And they would put them, if they're endorsing the actual actions of the therapist, it makes them liable for the therapist's actions. All they're doing is just connecting. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they're skimming off the top, because every dollar you give to the therapist, they skim off.
They get a bit,
yeah. So
but that's still just about connecting, not about supervising or being clinically responsible. Or
it doesn't make them completely, off the hook, but it does put it into and what, consumers will say that have been harmed by therapists on BetterHelp or Talkspace is, well, that's unfair. And I'll say, well, yeah, but that's the way the industry works. If you go to a therapist that has an office down the street, there's a good chance that literally no one is watching over them.
Right.
The only governing body is the state licensing board. And so at least with these apps, there's at least one other layer of accountability, possibly. But, it's a pretty unregulated, unmonitored industry to begin with. And so the fact that some people are being harmed by therapists on BetterHelp and Talkspace doesn't surprise me at all, especially considering all the emails we get from clients talking about bad behavior from therapists, including this one. Anyway, so, and if you want to know, I did a whole deep dive on BetterHelp and whether or not it's evil a year ago, and discussed all these ins and outs, of which I understand, but and so the other thing is that I'll just tack on here that, and this is just a speculation of mine, is that when companies do bad things, when you have bad experiences by a company like Uber or Lyft or Grubhub or something, you will hear people complaining about it, but you won't see a movement of people trying to eliminate it altogether.
Yeah. Right.
People don't try to say, well, I got screwed, Grubhub, I never got my food, but they charged me anyway, which regularly happens, by the way. It's happened to me. Oh my God. Yeah. Grubhub, Uber, not so much Lyft, DoorDash, 1 out of 5 times something I either won't get the food, it'll arrive 2 hours late, and I can see their car on the app just parked. Someone, because the way it works with DoorDash and Uber Eats and all these is, you do the order, the restaurant makes the thing, and then this notification goes out of like ready to pick up or something, right? And then all a driver has to do is say, I'll pick that up. They sort of say, I got that one. Oh. But they don't have to actually go get it. So what they can do is they can accept like 7 different orders or one order and just not pick it up because they want that money.
Wow.
Because once they accept the order, regardless of what happens, they get the money. They don't have to pick up the food. They don't have to deliver it.
They tack a tip on.
I've already tipped them. Yeah. You have to pre-tip.
You have to pre-tip.
So the whole thing is that as soon as they click, yes, I get it. I mean, maybe they have to pick up the food, but at the very least, they don't have to bring it to me. And trying to complain to Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub or Uber or Lyft is a nightmare. Like, you cannot complain. And I've done it before. They've delivered to the wrong house when I'm like, do you understand how addresses work? My house has a number. You delivered it to the house down the street where the number doesn't correspond with the number on the order. It's not hard. So anyway, so you won't see movements of people
of course not.
Just rising up and saying, we need to get rid of all this stuff. This stuff just needs to go away. We don't want any company doing this. This is horrible. But you will see that against therapy apps. There will be problems because, of course, when you have tens of thousands of customers, there's going to be problems. But there is a movement, especially like a year or two ago.
Oh, no kidding.
To just eliminate Talkspace and BetterHelp from the planet.
Wow.
Like, it's just like this, they're evil companies and they're trying to, they're just da-da-da. And I have a speculation is because it has to do with therapy.
Yeah,
somehow therapy is scary to people or something. Or they've been harmed by therapists in the past, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Or the corporatization of therapy is suspect to people or something.
Well, that's happening anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
But the ground level of the Talkspace BetterHelp therapist is still in private practice.
Yeah.
Those apps do not dictate how the therapists operate.
Right.
The therapist is in private practice. They get to do whatever they want.
They have a license with the state, then they're good.
Right. So
that's the overseer is actually
right. It's a broker.
Yes.
Anyway, so That's just my little.
Okay. Well, so what happened?
And last asterisk I'll say.
Oh, okay.
Is you and I are often fielding emails from people saying they can't find a fucking therapist.
Yeah, I just had a phone call today.
Yeah. And therapists are overbooked or people don't have time. You know, imagine you have 4 kids and you have a full-time job. Like, when would you fucking go to therapy? It's hard.
Right.
So the fact that these other options are available with some cautions around the model, like, hey, just know this isn't like in-person therapy. It's this other kind of way, and it might not feel as personal, But we need more options, right? We need, clients need more options, clearly, because they don't have enough options. And we need more therapists out there.
Well, the thing about this lady, though, is she'd probably be a bad therapist in person, too.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I'm sort of railing against the people that are trying to eliminate BetterHelp.
Okay.
I'm saying, yes, there are problems, but the overall good of providing more services to people is far outweighs. And so many people have benefited from BetterHelp and Talkspace.
Right.
Anyway, and full disclosure, as all you listeners know, BetterHelp is a sponsor of this podcast, and so maybe not this episode, but and we have many sponsors, but BetterHelp is one of them, and so I should just be.
I didn't know you had many sponsors.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ads that run, and
wow,
there's a new sponsor that's coming up that has to do with erectile dysfunction pills.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know why I'm laughing when I'm saying that, but I just thought I'd mention that.
Little apples and oranges.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to get happy, I suppose. BetterHelp in other ways. Yeah. So, yeah, this counselor was taken down from the app.
Right.
BetterHelp, Talkspace, whoever it was, says, okay, you need to terminate with all your clients, and you can't work with us anymore because of what we've seen. And then the app actually called the board, which is very responsible of them, and handed over all the records that they had.
Oh, right, yeah.
The board investigators asked the counselor whether the therapist provided a professional disclosure statement, and as you guessed, the counselor said, no, I do not. Do you know why she did not?
No.
She said she thought the app's terms and conditions were sufficient.
Oh.
Because, every app, and especially this one, there's a terms and conditions thing that you have to, agree to. That long...
Yeah, but that's not going to protect me.
No.
Yeah.
Of course not. Plus, it doesn't disclose the things you have to disclose about you personally.
About me, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
They also asked to review the client file. What do you think they found, the board?
She didn't keep one.
She didn't keep a fucking file, Bob.
Wow.
Nothing. No notes, no assessment plan, no treatment plan, nada, nothing. And she thought, what do you think, when she gave an excuse, what do you think it was?
She thought the emails were the notes.
Yeah. She thought the text exchanges were sufficient as a file, which is ridiculous. That's like an in-person therapist just recording all their sessions as a cassette and just saying, well, that's my file.
Yeah.
And no,
that's not a file.
That's not a file.
Oh, man.
It's not organized like a file,
Oh,
I mean,
boy.
it would suffice as a record that you could refer to. You could say, refer to session X for a further conversation, whatever. But you need to have a file. Again, stupid is as stupid does. I don't even know if that's what this saying means. It probably doesn't. But we always see this with therapists. When they're unethical and dumb, they're unethical and dumb, just across the board.
Yeah.
And that's why when we detect these kinds of things, we have to take these people down, because it's probably not an isolated event.
Probably not.
That they're doing this growth.
Yes. There's a good chance that she's not keeping files on anybody.
Right. And there's a chance that she's harming clients in ways that we can't even imagine.
Oh,
you know what I mean? So the resolution, the board concluded that the counselor breached applicable state and federal statutes, regulations, and the American Counseling Association Code of Ethics. Failure to provide a disclosure, failure to maintain a file, failure to take reasonable efforts to advance the welfare of the client, failure to take reasonable steps to avoid harming the client, and failure to conform to the higher standards of conduct and professionalism. what do you think they did, the state board?
They sent her to counseling and made her shape up.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. But this time they actually revoked her license.
They revoked her license.
Yeah.
Was that forever?
It sounded like it.
Wow.
And a $1,000 fine, which I find to be kind of funny.
That is funny.
Yeah, I mean, there was no... Usually in these briefs, there are discussions around probation or revoked with the invitation to take these classes. They could get their license back. So I don't know if that's the case, but at the very least, they just took her license away completely.
Wow.
Yeah. So...
Well, that sounds about right, though. I mean, you know.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, why do we have licenses if not to prevent these individuals like this from practicing? The society does not need this person. In fact, society is better off without this person being a counselor.
I mean, I presume that the conclusion is not trainable. Like, somehow got sort of slipped through the cracks and not trainable.
Right. I think that was I didn't
it makes
read the whole
sense that
thing.
it would be.
That someone that would exhibit all of those behaviors, that they clearly... There's some sort of capacity, some sort of innate aspect of this person that even if they got more training, which, you know, I'm sure that this therapist had been through a lot of training, there would be little hope of harm not occurring in the future, which I would absolutely agree with. I mean, what's the chance that somehow she's just going to somehow become a compassionate, non-psychopathic? I don't know if she's a psychopath, but there's something wrong with her.
Something wrong. Yeah.
Deep there. I mean, just, again, trying to help you is like Groundhog's Day. It's like I'm starting from square one with you every day.
Ugh.
Any guy looking for a wife is probably not going to be crazy about your out-of-control kids. If you don't change, you're going to end up a withered, lonely old lady.
Ugh.
I think we're soulmates. We should hang out next time. Like
that one, it's like, which one of these ain't like the others?
I know, right? Well, like I said, stupid is as stupid is.
Right.
All right, let's take a break and we get back. I have a lot of emails about therapy and that kind of stuff. What do you say?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right, we're back from the break. I thought we'd do an OPP, an old patron praise, for those patrons who became patrons all the way back in March of 2020.
Whoa.
The beginning of the pandemic.
The beginning of the pandemic.
And have stayed patrons ever since.
Wow.
We have Layla from the Netherlands. Yeah. Lindsay and Marta and Greg and Chris and Eric and Lewis from God knows where. And Jennifer from Darien Center, New York. Do you know where that is?
No,
Darien Center.
Never heard of that. It sounds rural.
Emily from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So thank you all for becoming patrons all the way back in March of 2020 and staying patrons ever since. Annual patron Megan from Michigan says, is it generally hard to find a therapist with a similar style to what you describe on your podcast? My current therapist and I have been together about 1.5 years, and it has been good, but I think I desire to have a therapist closer to the Kirk Honda style, which apparently has caused my therapist to question, well, it seems like you are looking for something different from what we are doing here. Am I just confused? Is it bad to have this desire? End of email. So essentially what they're saying is they've been hearing us talk about, I think, more attachment style therapy. Yeah. More corrective experience style therapy. Right. And they went to their therapist of 1.5 years that they have enjoyed, their therapist. And their therapist was like, after maybe going back and forth, the therapist was like, well, it looks like you're asking for something that is different from what we're doing here, which I would imply means something that I don't do. Or I don't know, maybe the therapist is just like, it sounds like maybe you don't like what we're doing here, or I don't know. I would, if obviously, Megan, you should inquire more as to what the therapist meant. Right. But anyway, Bob, Megan's saying, am I confused? Is it bad to have this desire? What do you think?
No, there's nothing wrong with that desire. Clearly, Megan likes you. I like you too. If you weren't my friend, I'd hire you. Of course, you're probably full. But it's not bad. I'm wondering if it is hard though. Like if the sort of the state of the pendulum is swinging towards people like getting CBT type, sort of mental health technician kind of stuff, as opposed to what I would consider more old, but in my opinion, more relevant, focus on humanistic approach, or attachment based, and
Right.
I wonder if that's less available or less common, particularly among people coming out of graduate school who are probably getting a lot of the quote unquote evidence based. And I know you just rolled your eyes because the evidence based is but the way they typically use that is, CBT is basically, they say evidence based, and really they're talking about CBT.
Yeah, to me, it'd be like as if Toyota came out and said, we have the only car that gets you to work. We have the only evidence-based car. And it's like, well, I get that you are trying to promote that your brand is better than the others. Like, that's what brands do. But it simply ain't true, because a lot of cars will get you to work.
Yeah. I had a Toyota. I had a Camry. Corolla, not a Camry. My friend called it a Camry because she liked it.
You didn't want to buy a Honda? What's wrong with you?
Oh, no, it was a gift. My brother gave it to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my brother gave me a car.
You should have refused it, because Hondas are better.
He gave me a car. This was in 2000 I did have a Honda, but it was an Acura. But and I would still have that car, except it got stolen out of the front of my house and found in Des Moines, not Iowa, Des Moines, Washington, south of Seattle, with no seats. And when the tow truck guy's like, yeah, those seats are on their way to Eastern Europe right now. I'm like, they want the seats? He's like, oh yeah, they want the seats. They were heated. It was an Acura.
Wow.
Integra, like yours, but a little bit newer, 97, I think.
Huh.
I love that car. It was a great car.
Do I remember your Integra?
Silver.
Huh.
You've seen it.
Yeah.
But I didn't have it very long because it got stolen.
Oh.
And it had a cool thing because that was when I had the condo. That's when I had the...
Okay.
Yeah.
By the Wing Dome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Chicken. Anyways, I only ate there twice.
I think I only ate there twice, maybe with you.
You ate there at least once with me the day we moved in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You would get so people out there, Wing Dome is a beer hall / chicken wing, like spicy wing place.
Called the Wing Dome because?
Of Kingdom?
The Kingdom. It was clever. That's where the Mariners used to play and the Seahawks used to play.
20 years ago, last week, it blew up.
Wow.
And I was there. I went and saw
it?
I watched
I saw a video of it.
Yeah,
wow.
I was in a building that had a really great view of it.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway. And so Bob's condo, one of his first home he bought,
the first one I bought,
was right over the Wing Dome, so the smell of the Wing Dome would come in through the window.
My place smelled like chicken.
Yeah.
It was good. I liked it.
Yeah. Anyway, so...
Oh, okay. So yes.
This person's saying...
Yeah, right.
I've been trying to get my therapist to be more attachment-based, more corrective experience-based.
Mm-hmm.
Is it bad to have this desire?
No.
Yeah.
Not bad to have the desire, but it may be that they don't do that sort of thing, or that's not what they believe is helpful, or believe that the treatment plan it ought to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Megan, I would continue to talk about it with your therapist.
Yes.
It's also possible that your therapist does this but doesn't word it in that way. So the principle that I would try to get across to your therapist, which you are absolutely entitled to ask for 100%. It's your therapy. You're paying money for it, or someone's paying money for it. You're spending your time doing it.
Yeah.
And you deserve this sort of therapy, or at least you deserve to explore that with the person.
Yeah.
And so there are various words that you can actually use, but one of them would be like, I want to process. Sometimes I don't tend to use the word process because I find it to be a very ambiguous word, but a lot of therapists will use it as opposed to, they'll use it as a different form of therapy than CBT oriented therapy. Yeah. And it's like, I want to process my feelings. You could say that. Is that okay? I feel like I would benefit if I was able to process my history or process my feelings. Some therapists will understand that and will say, oh yeah, that's fine. Because if you said to them, I want to do schema therapy or I want to do psychodynamic stuff, they might say like, oh, I don't do that kind of work. But they might actually do that kind of work, but they just call it something different.
Else. Yeah.
Anyway. Patron Shivy has a long email here, but I think it's important to read. Her main thing is, how do I avoid shitty and unethical therapists?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing to do.
But just getting into the email here. So she says, I sent a $10 super chat during your Q&A on YouTube because I had a question that's been bugging me for a while, and I can't be the only one who has the same question. So just chiming in here, I do live Q&As on YouTube every now and then, and I didn't know that you could do this. People actually started doing this, and I'm like, what is that? Where you can actually pay money and have your comment or question highlighted really severely.
Really?
Yeah. So, there's this running chat rooms,
thing. Yeah.
People asking, you've seen it, right?
Uh-huh.
And then if you do the super chat thing, you can have your question be very highlighted anyway.
Oh.
And so that's what she's talking about. And the way that it ends up working on the Q&A is that there's so many people asking questions, I can't answer them all, particularly with my long-winded way of answering questions.
How many questions would you get in, say, an hour?
I feel like I get to a lot.
No. How many people ask questions?
Probably 10 times more than I could get to.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So maybe not that many, but anyway, too many. And so what ends up happening is people started to realize, well, if I do a super chat, it kind of guilts Kirk because I'm paying money into answering at least my question, you know what I mean? Which I feel bad about because on some hand, it's like I don't want to only be answering the questions for people that can afford to pay or motivated.
Oh, yeah. You could feel guilty for lots of things.
But anyway, so patron Shivy sent a super chat asking a question, and she says, it was regarding 3 bad experiences with therapists and how I can get over my dread in finding a new one. I wrote that 2 therapists ghosted me, and one seemed to be using me for her book. So just chiming in here.
Yeah.
Her comment to me was, how do I, find a new therapist, or how do I get over what happened to me? Because I had 2 therapists that ghosted me, and one seemed to be using me for her book.
Huh.
So, and when I get these questions, it's pretty rapid fire. And so I don't have obviously any time to go back and forth with people.
Yeah.
And apparently, which sounds like me, she says, at first it was hard to swallow your response of, maybe it's you.
Whoa.
Which I would not have said only. I'm sure I didn't say, maybe it's you, moving on. I would have said something like, well, that's terrible. I'm sorry that happened to you. There are bad therapists out there.
Yes.
But maybe it's you. Because when I hear someone, it's just anecdotal, come to me with multiple catastrophes with previous therapists, there's, in my experience, usually a component of the client has a personality that actually will either interpret things that way and or what do they say, prophecy, a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing.
Like elicit the behavior of, in this case, ghosting.
Right.
Because they behave in a way that's obnoxious or difficult or something.
Right. And or they interpret it as ghosting when it wasn't, or something, because to hear someone say, I've had 3 therapists in my life, 2 of them ghosted me, and one seemed to be using me for her book.
Yeah.
I would be like, well, that, of course there are bad therapists out there.
Sure.
But that doesn't sound likely,
Right.
Like, what's the chance of that happening? I mean, you're essentially, especially the way you're wording it, these are like psychopaths with no empathy. Like, what's wrong with these people? Yeah. And so usually I find that it does, at least in part, have to do with the client. I'm not victim blaming. Of course, you can have a bad string of therapists for sure.
Sure.
Which actually seems to be the case because Shivy actually gives some more detail here. And I think I might have asked her to do that. And by the way, Shivy, I apologize for sort of victim blaming on YouTube Live. I should probably just not even say something like that, even though I'm thinking it, because I don't have enough information to say it. It's a pretty destructive thing to say. But anyway, so Shivy, you're saying the first ghost therapist was during my first semester of college in 2002. I was severely depressed. I think I saw her 2 or 3 times. She gave me an assessment and recommended I talk to a doctor about getting an antidepressant. So then one day, I was waiting outside her office for my next scheduled session and was informed that she had moved to another city.
Whoa.
I was too ignorant at the time to really understand that this was unethical, but my feelings were definitely hurt.
Yeah.
And the 18-year-old me thought maybe I wasn't worthy of being seen. I know it doesn't make sense, but I was clueless. So I didn't return to a therapist for many years. What do you think about that first experience, Bob?
Well, it sounds terrible. And a lot of us would have that perception or that sort of sense of things. Oh, maybe it's me. And yeah, it's not. And I could see me back then having a similar kind of interpretation of things, coming out of pain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty awful.
Yeah.
If I heard about the situation and was a colleague or a supervisor of this therapist, I would tear them a new one because under no circumstances should a client be treated this way.
No.
The only thing I can think that was a mistake is that the therapist thought that they had terminated with you by recommending you talk with a doctor about getting on an antidepressant, and thought that, I don't know, but the only so there's a version of this story where this is literally just a completely irresponsible therapist that, because they moved, it wasn't like they just ghosted you for your next session.
Right.
They moved and failed to inform you that they were closing their practice, and so it's possible that so there's that story where it's just like they just failed to inform you. I mean, but the fact that they were moving, they would have known about it months in advance, probably. So it's like, why did they even start with you in the first place? But I don't know. But the only thing I can think of is, in terms of if we were to investigate this, the therapist might say, I either did or I thought I did terminate after I recommended that they, get on an antidepressant, and they just failed to inform you that the next session wasn't on the books anymore or something. But anyway, it's possible that the therapist, either way, it's awful. Like the fact that even if the therapist had maybe kind of informed, they clearly didn't do it sufficiently to the fact that you showed up to the next session and they just weren't even there. And for you therapists out there, and I'm sure you get this, but if you don't, or if you need to be inspired, and maybe I'm just saying this to myself, when we go to therapy as human beings, it is one of the most vulnerable things we can ever do.
Yeah.
That's why so many people avoid it. And it might look like people are just showing up to your office and they're just yammering. It's just part of their normal life, and it's totally comfortable. It's not. It's not a comfortable experience. It's very vulnerable. There's a lot of hopes and dreams that clients will have. There's a lot of vulnerability, and so you just have to, cradle that very carefully. Anyway, she says, the second bad experience was with a Christian-based therapist in 2017. She made it clear at the beginning that she was writing a book on a psych process that she invented. This year had been the worst year of my life. A lot of bad things happened to me. Every session, she insisted that I trust the process she created, which basically involved a lot of eye closing, imagining things, and other conventional methods. I gave her the benefit of the doubt and actually saw her 10 plus times. I was hoping this process would help me, and it just didn't. In retrospect, I realized that she didn't ask me any meaningful questions about myself or my life after the first session. What do you think about that one, Bob?
Mistake.
More words.
Oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. Sorry. Okay, here's what I think. I think that the therapist got too invested in their treatment. I can see how it could happen. If you're writing a book, then you're kind of immersed in your model or whatever, and you lose sight of the client. But when a client speaks up and says, hey, I don't want to do this, then one ought to listen. Like, some things happened recently at home here, and Colleen was talking to her therapist who does a certain kind of thing, the way they open, and Colleen was in crisis and said, no, I don't want to do that. And the therapist dropped it and was responsive to Colleen where she was, which, just seems human. I think we ought to be human just that ought to be the bedrock.
Yeah.
Be human.
Yeah. Unless you're not, and you have to disclose that to the clients before they come into your office. You want to tell your clients, if you're going to work with me, understand I'm not like other therapists. I will not talk about your crises. I have a program that I run. It's sort of
Sure,
like with your DBT.
That's your deal. Yeah.
With your DBT class.
Oh yeah. We orient. We're curriculum driven. No
Right.
time for any one person. Blah 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 blah.
Right.
And so nobody expects anything because they've been oriented to what to expect.
Now, we would also hope that prospective clients would be able to interpret what those disclosures would even mean. But anyway,
Sure.
But yeah. So what I'll say to this one is it just wasn't a good match.
No.
The therapist had a thing. We could scrutinize it. It's like, she invented a treatment process, and she's writing a book on it. Who knows what that means?
Sure.
That could mean like she's the next Marsha Linehan, or it could mean she's a total quack. I'm guessing it's the latter, just a guess.
Marsha was a very good therapist.
Yeah.
Really decent and responsive, despite having a really, you could say, a highly regimented or manualized treatment.
Yeah.
Very decent human.
Right. Yeah. I hope I said that right. I was like saying...
Oh, yeah. No, you did. I just
Okay.
wanted to highlight that.
Right. So, and you went to her, and in the beginning, she made it clear, look, I'm writing a book, and I'm doing a thing, and I'm going to be using this thing that I invented. And now, from your perspective as a client, how are you supposed to be able to, evaluate?
That's not going to mean anything to me.
Yeah, you're just going, I don't know.
Yeah.
Therapy is therapy, right?
Like an astrophysicist talking about the stars to a first grader.
Right.
You got to talk to your audience where they are. They don't know all this technical whatever.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't a good match, and you, I'm guessing, terminated because of that, which
good for you.
Which they didn't ghost you, at least.
And you ended it because it wasn't working for you. Good for you.
Yeah. And then you say the second ghosting therapist was in 2019.
Yeah.
Her profile in Psychology Today stated she was a specialist in alcoholism, which was precisely why my husband and I chose her.
Mm-hmm.
He has a drinking problem, and I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. She told me in my personal session that she's a recovering alcoholic, which I found commendable, but also strange, as I'd have thought treating it would be kind of triggering. So just chiming in here, it's very common for people in addiction specialties to have come from an addiction themselves.
Very common.
Yeah. For a variety of reasons. One, it's just kind of in the culture that when you recover, you might start hearing about other people in recovery who have become professionals. But also, to help people with addiction, it's so much easier when you yourself have struggled and recovered from addiction yourself, because addiction is it's a whole world, it's a whole set of experiences that you can't really learn about in a book.
No.
So it's not, and then you're saying, you're thinking that treating addiction could be triggering maybe, but often not. I mean, because when you're recovering from an addiction and you're providing addiction treatment services, and at least you're on the sort of good side of recovery, you're not struggling with your recovery. Having that daily reminder as you're talking with your clients, as you're saying things, actually helps your own sobriety. So there's that. But yeah, it could be triggering for people. But anyway, after the session, she had us email her list. She had us email her a list of resentments that we have toward each other. So, Bob, have you heard of an intervention like this before?
She had them email, the therapist wanted the couple to email the therapist.
A list of resentments they have towards each other.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I have to think about it, but that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Why?
Because you're just stoking two things: the flame of the resentment inside each person, and then coloring your own view based on the information that you get. Like, if I'm the therapist, I'm coloring my own view based on resentment. I don't want to color my review based on resentment. People that are married, sometimes they have resentments of one another. It doesn't mean that describes the bulk or the heart of their relationship. Maybe it's useful, maybe it isn't, but I think the thing that's probably more relevant is the mechanism that leads me into resentment as opposed to the actual content of the resentment. Because what I've discovered about resentment is it is frustrated desire that somehow cannot speak its own name. That's a good sentence, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Just made that up.
Yeah. And so you're saying you would worry that you would your view of each person would be diminished in a bad way.
Yes.
By having all these.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you saying because it's the beginning of therapy, or are you saying just ever with a client?
I'd say the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, ever. Yeah, that might be. I mean, it's not something I would ever seek out. I don't think it's not something I ever have sought out.
Yeah.
Is what are your resentments? Let's have a list. But at the beginning, for sure. And I've noticed that in me when I don't know the couple. Sometimes when I'm first learning them and I, have my one-on-one with each person, my view of the other is totally colored by, less so than it used to be, experience as a good teacher, but can still be swayed by the opinion. And oftentimes when people are showing up in couple therapy, they're having a tough time in their relationships. So they have a crappy opinion or resentment, say in this case, about partner and frustration and so forth.
Right.
So, yeah. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. It's not something that I do, but I could stand behind it. It would elicit some reflection for the first time, to really just think about what do I resent? Because I think all of us have, I don't know if we would word them resentments, ongoing requests that are frustrated, right? Ongoing desires that we would like, needs that we have about our partners that are chronically frustrated, right? And to make a list of those, I think would be fine. So I don't think there's anything wrong with what she did.
Isn't that part of 12-step? A list of resentments? Not so much that you're going to go do.
There's a list of amends that you make.
You make amends,
and,
right?
And a list of all the things you have done. It's more about what you have done.
Isn't there something in the 12 steps about holding resentment?
I mean, maybe.
It's been a while.
But yeah, I mean, it could be something along those lines. So yeah. And she goes on to say, this opened up a lot of wounds from our 4-year relationship, but I remained hopeful that she was doing this to help us. She kept in touch over the next few days, trying to schedule something individually first with my husband. But once we completed our assignment and sent our resentment list to her, we never heard from her again.
Whoa.
Gone, just like that. We called and texted with no answer. So finally I emailed her and told her how I felt and how hurt we were. Still no response. And that was that.
Did she die?
Well, it could be. I mean, that's the first thing I would think, or at least one of the options. Or had COVID, or I don't know, it's 2019. So, who knows what happened?
Yeah.
But something could have happened. I don't know.
That happened to Colleen's dermatologist. She just dropped off the planet. We looked everywhere for her. No follow-up, no referral, no hey, I'm retiring. We couldn't even find an obituary. Just disappeared.
Wow.
Which, I guess occasionally happens.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, maybe domestic violence and they had to leave the state or something, or...
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be pretty extreme, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's rare, but obviously either death or incapacitation or running from the law, or you have a stroke or something, or your computer dies and all your files get erased and you try to piece it together and you only get some of it back.
Do you use computer for files?
I use both.
Yeah.
I use computer and
paper.
Physical file.
Yeah.
I have a hybrid, if you will. But, or I don't know. But, so we don't know. I mean, if the person died, then that would justify what happened. It still doesn't justify it because but it doesn't surprise me.
Right.
I would guess that a minority of therapists are like you and me, Bob, that have a contingency around this. Like,
you're my guy.
Yeah, if God help us, God help our clients if both of us die at the same time, or become incapacitated at the same time, because we're supposed to
help each other. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so what was I going to say? That sucks, and it's
if
also
they did die, they didn't have a professional will, some maybe in place. Is that the idea?
Right.
Yeah.
Or the therapist literally just ghosted them.
Right.
Or fell off the wagon. I mean, that's another option in terms of their own alcoholism recovery.
Oh, right. Oh, wow.
But is it possible that a second therapist just ghosted this person? Yes.
Sure.
It's also possible that, because I think the reason why the emailer is writing in the sequence, it's like, I, took this risk and emailed in this, we both these long lists of resentments, and then the therapist just ghosted us.
Right.
Is it because of what we wrote in the resentment list? Was it too much for her?
Sure.
Or she thought we were terrible people or something?
That's exactly what I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, wonder about, not believe, but
see. But again, hearing the stories that we do about therapists, I wouldn't, I wouldn't like be that surprised if a therapist was like, whoa, these people are beyond what I can help with. So, moving on in life.
I feel kind of cynical about our field right now.
Yeah. I mean, I would say from emails and reports, it's like 90% of therapists are terrible. But anecdotally, I know a lot of therapists. 90% of therapists are great and hardworking and ethical, and would be mortified. I mean, part of the reason why I also read the brief that I read earlier from my malpractice is for you therapists out there, particularly you novice therapists, I want to show you what we're talking about when we're talking about ethical codes and professionalism. We're talking about things that are extremely obvious to you, because so many people, they get out of graduate school and they're terrified of accepting a $5 Starbucks card from a client as a gift, and they're worried that they're going to be put in prison. Literally, there's a paranoia about like being locked up, or at the very least losing their license if a client hugs them suddenly, and they're like, oh, was I supposed to hug him back? What was I supposed to? And it's like, no, the kinds of things that people get in trouble for on the reg are the most obvious things that a sane therapist would never even approach.
Keep a file.
Yeah. Keeping a file, having a disclosure statement, not saying things like you're a crusty old lady, like it's pretty obvious, not asking to hang out, not saying you're my soulmate, I want to hang out with you. Like, it's pretty obvious what that you're never going to do that as a novice therapist. And so you don't have to worry about these like little fringe things, particularly, concern yourself with them, think about it, plan ahead, but don't get all, terrified and paranoid about these things happening, or even if they did happen, because nothing's going to happen to you. You should consider it and talk about it, particularly with your supervisor, work it out. But, the ethical police aren't going to come to your door and haul you away. Yeah. But anyway, so that sounds pretty awful. So when she wrote into the Q&A, and she's like, two therapists ghosted me and one seemed to be using me for her book. I mean, that is a viable explanation of what happened. I mean, two therapists did absolutely ghost her. It's unknown why. Right. We there could be a viable explanation, but in terms of the and then the therapist that, I wouldn't phrase it as using me for her book. I mean, that's not how I'd phrase it. I'd phrase it like, you didn't vibe with her model of therapy. That's all. And that happens all the time. So it's not like you were wronged by that second therapist. It was just a bad match. That happens all the time. Mm-hmm. I had a bad match with a therapist once. Really? I went 5 times ish, maybe more. And I found, him to be a nice person, but when he would reflect, he listened very well, but when he would summarize or reflect what he heard, sort of when he would say things, I found it frustrating because I felt like he never understood what I was talking about, even though I was talking about extremely sort of normal, mundane feelings. I just felt like, and maybe he did get me, but I didn't get that he got me.
You need to have that felt sense that the person gets you.
Yeah. And I don't find that I'm that complicated. So it wasn't like it was.
I don't get you.
Huh?
I don't get you at all.
Yeah. And so, after the first couple sessions, I thought, well, maybe it's just me. I'll give it some more.
Right.
This guy takes my insurance, which he's open, he's close by. I should really try to give it a try. Right. And after 5 sessions, I was like, no, not for me. Now, I wouldn't phrase that as he somehow wronged me. No. He's just a bad fit, you know? So that Christian-based therapist was just a bad fit. The other two, you could say you were ghosted, but we don't know if they ghosted you. We just know that you were ghosted.
Yeah.
There's a difference there.
Yes.
I'm not defending them.
No.
I'm just saying there's a lot of questions. And
But this would leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth.
Yeah, and you've had, Shivi, some incredibly bad luck.
Yeah.
The second therapist I find to be a very normal experience, so that's not bad luck. But 2 out of 3 therapists where you have experienced being ghosted is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, and awful. So your questions are, how do I get over these bad experiences?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bob, what do you think?
Well, do you still want to be in therapy with your partner, or, because then you probably want to get over it because you still want something out of therapy. But if you don't want to be in therapy, why quote get over it? Like,
Well, she does want to be in therapy.
oh, okay, then did she want to know how?
Yeah. How do I find a good one? She says.
Oh man, I don't know. Kick the tires.
Yeah.
And kick a lot of tires.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's really hard because every therapist I know is booked,
Yeah.
right? So it's not like it's easy.
Yeah. Right. So finding a good therapist is like finding a lifetime partner, soulmate, or a best friend. You don't just swipe right and expect nice things to happen. You don't just ask a friend out for a beer and expect this is your best friend for the rest of life. It takes cultivation, it takes trial and error, it takes a lifetime, really, or at least many years. And with therapy, it's the same thing. To find a good match, to find someone that really vibes with you and you really benefit from, can take maybe years to find the right therapist, but it's worth it.
Wow.
And I get how frustrating that is and how annoying that is, but it's worth it. And think of it like experiencing a bunch of different therapist styles so you can kind of zero in on the style that you like. Consider the next 5 therapists a bust, and if they aren't, then it's a bonus. But if they are worthless to you, or in one way or the other, then so be it. And also know that in all likelihood, you're never going to get ghosted again by a therapist, because for lightning to strike 3 times would be very weird. Yeah. The other thing that I would say, and I frequently will say this if you're trying to find a good therapist, is right from the beginning, either on the phone prior to actually engaging, or at best it's then, but if they don't have time for that in the first session,
right,
just lay all this out.
Yep.
Say, these 3 things happened to me. What do you think?
Right.
And gauge their response.
Yeah.
If their response is very lackluster, then, use that as a data point. But if their response is, holy fuck, what?
Yeah.
2 therapists just completely ghosted you? That's incredibly horrible. And then ask, how can you prevent that from happening to me? What's your policy on that? Because if someone asked me that question, I would have a good 2 or 3 paragraphs that would be pretty convincing that would never happen to me, and has never happened to me, that I would ghost a client like that. No. Especially if, I could see a scenario earlier in my career where I had 100 clients and I maybe forgot someone, which I know never happened, but I could see happening. But if they reached out to me and said, I could see a scenario where I thought I terminated with someone and I actually didn't terminate with them. Anyway.
You're saying that that's in the realm of possibility, not that it happened.
And if they reached out to me, I would definitely get back to them.
Yeah.
And say oh my God, what? I'm so sorry. So anyway, finding a good one, it just takes time. And again, just lay out all of the things right from the beginning. I think a lot of people think therapy is led by the therapist, and that's just not true, unless that's the sort of therapy you're looking for. But you want to just, especially in that first session, just really say, here are all my insecurities. I'm worried you're going to be a terrible therapist. I'm worried that you're going to disappoint me like the past 3. I'm worried that I'm going to have to spend 5 sessions with you before I even find out if you're good or bad, and I'm going to find out you're bad. If someone told that to me, I would have a response to that. And if someone doesn't have a good response to that, it's a data point. Because if they can't pass that simple test, then, maybe they're not for you.
Maybe.
So, yeah.
It sucks that that's the case, though. I wish it wasn't that hard.
But it also makes sense
Do you
because
think it'll always be that hard?
Yeah, because let's say that somehow, well, things could be facilitated by, better that if therapists really understood the category of therapy they were actually providing, but most therapists don't.
Yeah.
And there was descriptors. But then what would be the solution? So here's the solution, Bob. I think I'm formulating something. It'll never happen in my lifetime. But you'd have to have an overseer that understood theory, because most therapists don't even really understand what theory they're operating from, or they don't understand the common factors they're operating from. They'll say, oh, psychodynamic therapy, that's stupid, it's of the past, even though if I looked at them, they actually would look very psychodynamic to me. So you'd have to have someone that actually observed people and how they operated and categorize them based on a standardized set of categories. Then you would have to educate the public. Maybe when you're looking for a therapist, you go through like a week of training as a client on how to learn about what these labels mean and how to know what your issues are. Because you need to find the right therapist, you have to know what your issues are, and you also have to know what the different labels mean in terms of addressing those issues. So, because like when I was first looking for a therapist, I was, a graduate student, but I knew nothing about what therapy was in my first quarter of therapy, graduate school.
Right.
The only descriptor that I threw out there is I want someone to kick my ass. I remember saying that. I don't know why I was saying that. I don't know what conception I had of therapy. I think I had my first therapist did not kick my ass. He was extremely passive and listened without doing anything. And so I think I was looking for someone to have contact with me. But the way I framed it was, I want someone to kick my ass in therapy. And boy, did he kick my ass. My second therapist was, very confrontational.
In a good way?
I think I needed it. Yeah.
Oh, right on.
He was compassionate enough, but not very, honestly. Anyway, I did not know really what I was looking for. You know what I mean? And I surely didn't know what labels to look for on a Psychology Today profile. How do I know if someone's going to kick my ass or not? Right. And so you would have.
I didn't put that in my Psychology Today profile.
Yeah.
Ass kicker.
Yeah. So you would have to educate clients prior to actually, maybe there's like an online set of videos that you watch, but they'd have to be pretty good, and they'd have to be able to educate people of various different levels of sophistication when it comes to this sort of thing. I think that'd be the only way. Because that's a lot of stuff, right?
That's a lot of pretreatment.
Yeah. Because in order for a client to know what therapy they want, they have to understand even what their issues are and how to label them.
Yeah.
Because people will say, "Oh, I have anxiety," and then when we get into it, I'm like, "No, you're not. You're attachment insecure,
or depressed."
Yeah, or your life sucks. Like you're not anxious. You don't have anxiety. Or they have OCPD, or they have borderline. Yeah. A lot of people with borderline will claim at first, I have anxiety. It's like, no, you don't. You have borderline. Yeah. And so so if you don't even know what your problem is, how do you match that up with the treatment protocol you're looking for, the style of therapy? Then, even if you had that, Bob, it still would only reduce the search process by about a half, because you still have to try out the human being.
Right.
You still have to see how you meld with another clinician.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's, you have to experience that.
Yeah,
there's no way to know that based on a label or even a video of a therapist. Right. You know what I mean? So there's really no way around it. In the same way that a question, and it's not the same, but I think it's a similar process of how can we eliminate dating so I can just meet my soulmate? I think all of us understand that it's not possible. You have to live life to find your soulmate. You have to trial and error that shit over and over.
Do you think therapists have an ethical responsibility to train themselves to treat the widest population they can?
If they plan on accepting basically all clients that come knocking on the door, then yes. If they don't, then they don't have to do that, and they need to make sure that's very clear from the very beginning.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Got it. So, and that can be hard for a therapist because sometimes they don't know what they're doing.
Right. And that's what I was saying. You need some sort of overseer, and you can't depend on supervisors because half of supervisors are idiots and don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Oh, I really am cynical now. I just want to go deliver pizza. Except DoorDash sucks. Oh, God.
And I've experienced them. I've had 20-ish supervisors, and it's safe to say half of my supervisors didn't know what they were doing. They were either meh, just like there, and I was just there clocking the hour because I needed to get my license or something.
Yeah, right.
Or they're, as I've said before, just flat out abusive to me, just flat out.
I've had that too.
Harmful and like out to get me, and harmful to everyone they come into contact with. So
I had a supervisor when I worked at the clinic a long time ago who she did not like me. And I think she didn't like me because she set me up on a blind date with her best friend before she was my boss, when she was just another therapist in the clinic.
Wait, we've talked about this before, but I forget. So let's back up.
Oh, okay.
So you're at the clinic.
I'm at the clinic.
Late 90s?
I was an intern.
Late 90s or mid 90s?
Yeah, right at the end of grad school, 96, 97.
You're an intern.
I'm an intern.
And she sets you up with...
She's a therapist on the team there. I'm collegial, blah, blah, blah. And she sets me up for a blind date with her best friend. So I went over to her house with her and her husband and this best friend. Come for dinner. Nice person. Likable.
Yeah.
Not my type.
Yeah. And so, you told everyone that, not my type.
I don't remember who I told, but yeah, like I didn't follow up. I didn't do anything. I just, I didn't ghost anybody because I didn't make any promises, and I was really passive, and I probably should have been a little bit more proactive about that. But I think she just didn't like that I didn't like her friend. And then she became my boss.
Yeah.
And that was an ugly year. Weekly meetings that were just painful to get through. And I got an evaluation at some point during the course of the year, and she just shredded me. And I thought it was unjust and unfair and just shitty and blah, 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 blah. And I don't know how I'm going to survive it, but I'll just survive it, blah, blah, blah. And then I got another supervisor, David Taylor, who was like a hero to me, who mentored to me, who remained my supervisor even after he got kicked out of that clinic, in my opinion, really unjustly. So I hired him to help me learn how to be a therapist after he got kicked out. And there was a possibility that this lady would become my boss again. So I went to the clinic director and I'm like, I can't work with her. And she's like, oh yeah, we know that. You're not working with her. You're going to work with this other one over here. But I think probably my old supervisor went and said, I don't want him. Anyways.
What did you fight about?
Sorry, what?
What did you fight with her about?
I didn't fight with her about anything. I just didn't like her advice, and I think she mistreated me. She was cold and snooty and
so you'd give
judgy.
A case. Yeah, I mean, I've been there before. It's like it's an hour, people. Like if you're not a therapist out there, imagine sitting down with your boss, wherever you're working.
Yep.
For an hour. Every week.
Yep.
And you're expected to essentially be asking your boss for guidance.
Yep. Maybe
even personal guidance.
Some.
And mentorship. Imagine you're forced by law, by ethical code, by regulation, to meet with your boss an hour a week. Now, some of you would say, oh, I love my boss. But I'm guessing a lot of you out there, you don't like your boss that much anyway.
Yeah.
And you think, and some of you have bosses who are abusive. Some of you have bosses who are idiots. Imagine sitting down with them for an hour, and often you're sitting in the client seat. You're in their office.
That's what David Taylor used to say. He's like, oh, I just treat all the staff on here like they're my clients.
Yeah.
When he was our boss.
Yeah.
And he was great.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've been there where you're gotta go sit for an hour and just stare eye contact to eye contact,
right?
Face to face with my boss that I don't respect and maybe even are threatened by.
Oh yeah, I was intimidated, but also young and inexperienced, and didn't know how to speak for myself. Didn't know that speaking for myself was even something I could do or should do, and didn't put the cards on the table. Like, I think you got a grudge against me because I didn't want to date your friend, and now we're in this weird spot. But if that happened now, those cards would be on the table.
What would you say?
I'd say, I think you got a grudge against me because I didn't want to date your friend, and things between us saying they don't feel right. So I don't know how we're going to get through this, but I don't feel good about talking to you about my cases, especially with your attitude towards me.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what you want to do, but I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Now I'm 54 years old and I've been around the block twice.
Yeah.
So saying that wouldn't be comfortable, but I could do it.
Yeah.
But when I was 28, how old was I when I got out of school? I guess.
Yeah, about that.
28. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think I could. I wouldn't have the vocabulary for it, or the sense of it, the model of it. I wouldn't have the model for it.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of that's along those lines was, and I've talked about this story before, my supervisor just got out of a administrative meeting where she was yelled at, I surmise, for having bad production numbers.
Oh.
For those of you who don't work in therapy businesses, you might not understand this, but the business of, a therapy business, a mental health agency, they stay afloat because of clientele. And so you're essentially a factory, and there's inputs and outputs. And in order to stay afloat, these mental health agencies, they're not turning a big profit. At least back in the day, they weren't.
I don't know.
They were barely staying afloat. No one was going home rich. There weren't like stockholders of my agency that
I
were
had stock in mine.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's just not. There's not a huge.
No, this is not a high profit. It's not like Microsoft,
right?
Not
or
even close.
Bitcoin or something. You know, it's they're often nonprofit to begin with,
right?
But even if they aren't, it's there's a pretty small margin is the thing. There are big conglomerates, like Group Health and Kaiser and this kind of thing that probably there are rich people, but generally speaking, mental health agencies are barely scraping by, and so they're often motivated by, oh crap, we are going to have to lay off half of our employees if we don't get more money. So there's a lot of anxiety about that. So there's this push towards working the labor force to their highest, but output.
Big caseloads.
Yeah. So you have the best case scenario to the administrator, because especially if they have divorced themselves from empathy for the therapist and the client, is in the 40-hour work week that the therapists have, they're literally seeing 38 hours of clients, and there's like 2 hours for paperwork and supervision or a staff meeting or something, and I'm exaggerating a little bit. It's probably more like 35 sessions. And on paper, to an administrator, it makes sense. It's like, well, let's look at their week. They have a staff meeting for an hour. They have supervision for an hour. They have a different staff meeting for another couple hours. All right, and we'll give them another hour to do paperwork. That's 35 sessions per week, and they get 5 hours. Because to them, it's like, well, you just sit there and do therapy for an hour, right? It's no big deal. But 35 hour, for especially when you're at an agency and you're coordinating with all these different people and you're eking out time to try to do your paperwork and this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
35 hours of therapy usually will have 10 to 15 hours of actual work that you have to do in addition to that. So you can't, there's all this time that sort of administrators can't really account for, or they're not aware of. And plus the stress of 35 sessions.
35 clinic hours in a week? Oh, because it's not like, you work an office job, you get up, you go to the bathroom, you go get a cup of coffee, you chat with your neighbor. 35 clinic hours is 35 client hours.
Yeah.
They're not just sitting there, I can sort of do the crossword puzzle while I.
Yeah, an analogy that I think of is if you were doing 35 hours of stage plays a week or something, you have to be on.
You gotta be on.
You're intensely concentrating and keeping it together.
Yeah.
And like regular office people, like you said, you can sort of zone out for 5 minutes or look at Amazon to shop for a new pair of shorts for a few minutes. You have a freedom of mind to kind of go with your
call
energy
your
level.
friend or
But with therapy, there's none of that, obviously.
No.
Anyway, so she came out of this meeting having been yelled at for not making me and all my, my few, because we weren't a big agency, maybe, my 7 or 8 colleagues.
Oh, really?
Our agency was really small. In fact, when I began my internship, I was literally the only intern, and there were like 4 other therapists.
I didn't know it was that small.
Yeah, it was very small. We were in a tiny Rambler house.
Really?
Yeah.
Is this Mary?
No, this is Federal Way Youth and Family
Way.
Services. Yeah. So, yeah, it was.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, I was the first intern. I think they were originally just basically like a group practice, and then they started to kind of branch off into Medicaid.
To the Medicaid, yeah.
Anyway, so I, bop into supervision with my supervisor, who is one of the best supervisors I've ever had, to be clear. But this one meeting, anyway, she sits down and she just starts berating me, and I'd never seen this from her before, and she's just attacking me for not having more clients shoved into my schedule during the week. And there'd always been this subtle, or maybe not so subtle, directive from her of just like, try to get your numbers up, try to get your numbers. We want you to be at 70% production. We want 70% of your hours, actual clinical hours, because then we're pulling in more money, that kind of thing. And, maybe there was some talk about that, but it was a very loose directive, and there were no consequences, and pretty much all the therapists were avoiding doing that. It's sort of like, look, the speed limit's 35, but a lot of people think of, well, I'll keep it to 42.
42.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to go 35. Let's not be ridiculous. Anyway, so, but she just starts laying into me, laying into me. And I'm starting, at first I'm like dealing with it, but over time I'm starting to kind of freak out. I'm starting to have a visceral adrenaline reaction, a fight or flight reaction. My heart's starting to pound. I'm starting to sweat. And I'm trying to defend myself. And then eventually I just started to kind of distance myself while I watched her like kind of say what she was saying to me. And I just said, yeah, we're done here. And I just stood up and walked out.
Good for you.
Like halfway through our supervision meeting, which is like unheard of. You don't, especially as a therapist supervisee.
Yeah, you know what? I never heard what happened after.
Well, I remember what happened immediately after, because I had a client and I was still kind of physically recovering.
Of course.
From the, castigation, if that's a word.
That's a good word.
And then the next time, I think I might have journaled about this, and maybe I could look that up. But I think she apologized. At the very least, we made up very quickly. And,
good.
And I learned she must have been in a state.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make it any better for me, but at least I can know that she probably won't be in that state very often.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Anyway, so all that's to say, it's a lot for me to have confidence in the supervisors out there to know what their supervisees are doing as a therapist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Such that they could be able to categorize what the therapist is doing, such that the consumer could know that label. That's why I think you need some sort of super expert to actually evaluate all that kind of stuff, which would take a lot of time and money.
And would change over time.
Yeah. Right.
Because
and by the client, I mean, as if someone observed my style of therapy, I would imagine it would take 30 to 50 hours of observation over various different clients and situations to even describe the category that I'm in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why kicking tires, That's
and
what
who you
do.
are 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why as a client, do your best to educate yourself, and listening to this podcast would help, but also kicking tires,
Yeah.
You, Shivy, tried 3 therapists and all of them were not to your liking. So, kick 7 more tires and make a choice. But you deserve the therapy that you need.
Yes. Yeah.
And that person is out there. I'm almost sure of it. And anyway, so that does it for that episode.
Good Lord.
Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
You deserve it.